Are we ready to get started? Let's do it. Sup, nerds? Happy Sunday. Sorry I'm live at a weird hour on a weird day, but there's been a lot going on and I haven't had time to cover any of it because I've been so absurdly busy. But I want to take the opportunity and chat about things and get some videos out. I'll probably still stream Wednesday, but wanted to get some things done today because I'm so behind. Let's do a quick thanks of subs. I do have YouTube chat open again. It does actually work again, which is great. We got Blue Guy starting, loving the weekend stream. Thank you for the 22 months of Prime. Black Rain with the 7 months of Prime. David with the 13 months, appreciate you. Anna with the Prime. Benji Mac with the 6 months. And Yash, the legend, 29 months in. Goddamn. Thank you all. Ping Chan from ping.gg, back when we were more focused on the video product. Our mascot was the penguin. Good old days. Thank you, Pranch, for the resub. And Ari with the resub as well. One day you'll move to SF? Fuck yeah. It's a good place to be. Hard to beat. TWT with the 10 months. Appreciate you a ton. Thank you all for showing up. It's been such a late night, random one-off stream, but I had things I wanted to film, so we're here to film. Yeah, speech to text is really good. I'm surprised how much I've been using it. 5 here is a lot later for a lot of others. Yeah, I saw web GPUs on everything now. That was really cool. I have that saved to maybe talk about another time. But today we got 2 pretty important topics. We obviously have the React CVE. I've collected a ton of things about it, including info on the Cloudflare outage that I haven't even read yet. Let me grab this. I want to remove these pins. Remove. There we go. What happens if I... Oh, that's just for this whole thing. I was wondering if I could hide that. Apparently I could select the text and it's hard to unselect it. There we go. Sunday stream, you're kind of drunk for this? Lol. I was relatively drunk at a show last night. Happy to be here and chilling. We're doing the Tansec thing later today for sure. That score doesn't mean anything outside of our leaderboard. Let me pull this up without leaking the leaderboard code. This is our leaderboard. I work really hard to maintain my #1 spot. I bombed. Yesterday I did good. The day before I bombed, though. Wait, no, yesterday was the day I bombed. Yeah, I bombed yesterday. So I lost some of my lead. I have the extension that shows you the breakdown every day. Like, it took me way too long to do part 2 yesterday. I was just not feeling it. But like day 6, I really didn't do too great day 6 either. Wait, no, I did part 2 really fast day 6. I had a couple clever hacks for it. That's fun. Krish and I are fighting for that #1 spot. Soka's also killing it too. Mark kind of took yesterday off. Like, he just didn't start until much, much later. So, like, that took a lot of his position. Was that yesterday or the day before? I know there was a day recently where Mark, like, didn't start until really late. Yeah, okay, it was 2 days ago. Mark started at 5 hours later. And despite that, is still holding a pretty strong 4th. Like, he has a real chance of coming back. Since there's only 12 problems this year, the comeback stories are significantly harder. because you don't have enough buffer to make up for it. I'm not doing debug December. What is this? Oh, this is cute. Take a look at that later. Let me... .NET IDE with Godot. Oh, God. The number of bad takes on why I moved off Next.js is a little alarming. I have to do the video on the React CVE first because so many people are assuming that we did it because of that, which is so low IQ that I need to have the right resources out there before I'm mean about it, or I'll feel bad, because I'm going to be really mean about that because it's really fucking stupid to think that a patched security thing that is patched on like 15 levels, that was patched and easy to fix and prevent before the exploit was even public. That's one of the most complex CVEs ever filed, is the reason that I'm changing my tech stack and upending our entire technical base. Is just really dumb. Like exceptionally dumb, even for the usual like Reddit reply guys, dumb. Yes, I've gotten at least like 20 or 30 replies, and a handful of them got like a lot of upvotes or likes on Twitter from people legitimately thinking that security issue is why we moved off of Next, which is just kind of fucking mentally ill. Like it's such a, like no two things can happen around the same time without them being related. Because that happened the day before I announced that we were moving off of Next, the fact that it took us 2 months to move off of Next doesn't matter to them anymore. They just don't think that far. Oh, gamer girl, good to see you. Going through a rough patch, I feel you. I've been going through it as well. Happy that Advent of Code has been helpful. Advent of Code got me through a lot too. Enjoy it. Yeah, hope you're doing okay. Keep your head up. I did see the state of AI from OpenRouter. I haven't had a chance to like really read it and see if there's any like lessons I can take from it to make content out of, but not unlikely I'll find something. Yo, Jiraj with the 12 months of tier 3, 39 total. Fucking legend. Thank you so much for the support. Close that before I forget. Anything else I need to close? I've been doing a lot of work, which makes it easier for me to leave things open I shouldn't. I appear to be pretty good. Nice. Yeah, this is a bit much on YouTube here. Like, ugh. Oh, good to see you, by the way, Tanner. I wish there was a VIP equivalent so I could make it easier to see you on here. But appreciate you for coming by. Going to be focused mostly on the security thing first, and then we're going to get to the TanStack move. And honestly, I almost feel bad doing the TanStack video now because I wanted to spend more time in the code base first, because I did very little with the migration. But I kind of, what I'm thinking is you guys can see my organic reaction to looking through all the changes that Julius made and seeing how I feel about it, like watching my miserable code get upended with something much better. Like, I'm so excited to be on TanStack. Sorry, I said to check something on my phone quick. Okay. There's a couple Chrome extensions that try to make YouTube chat better. There's a lot of layers that make it as broken as it is, sadly. It's not a trivial fix. I still need to try jujitsu. It's high on my list of things I'm excited to give an honest go. I just haven't had any free time to try new things. Every time I'm like, oh, I have this weekend to like catch up on things and do the stuff I want to. So much shit hits the fan. It's like crazy. I was going to be working on a feature I was really excited about for T3 chat this weekend and just ended up far, far too busy to even start it. I am hoping after Evan of Code today, I'll get to sit and work on some things, but probably not. Tomorrow I have a ton of meetings. I have something Tuesday. I don't remember. Wednesday stream again. Thursday I have a bunch of meetings and then an event at that night. And then Friday I have another set of events. Drizzle's V1's happening. Oh boy. Yeah, we have lots of features I'm very excited about coming. I'll be writing a formal roadmap for the team, and I might even make it public depending on how we're feeling about it. I want to like we still haven't gotten a feel for how much more productive we are now that Julius is here, because since Julius has gotten here, we've used the like IRL communication to do a bunch of overhauls that we had been delaying, like rewriting everything with effect, rewriting the like server bindings and the relationship between server and client with TanStack, redoing the routing with TanStack, rebuilding the observability layer. All of these types of things would have been much harder to do remotely. And now that we're together, like as a team, it's much less miserable to do. So I really wanted to like figure out how good we are at doing features now that we've done all of this, but we haven't had a chance because there was just so much tech debt, I will admit. We could have kept working on things on top of it and probably would have been able to ship a lot of things still, but I didn't want to do that to my team. Yeah. I have nothing against remote work. It's just important to recognize the gap when you could be in person. Like there is a meaningful difference. Like Yash is incredible. He is pushing way more code than I am right now. But he isn't like here in the trenches with us, which limits how helpful he reasonably could be when we're dealing with weird shit going on. That said, it also has benefits because we'll all be like locked in thinking it's one thing, but we haven't kept Yash up to date. So he's exploring a different option that ends up being correct. So there's benefits for both, but having a good, strong, established in-person group is really, really helpful. If you're good enough, you can cancel some of the benefit. But once you have people that are good enough and in person, it becomes a multiplier. Yeah. Before I forget, Yash, are you interested in the wrapped feature? Because I feel like that's something that fits under your specific brand of not really looking at the borders between pieces and making things come together. Like that's like, I haven't like formally said this like anything vaguely publicly before, but the thing that makes Yash such a uniquely great engineer is he doesn't perceive the boundaries between things the way that we do. Like if I have a package that's not operating how I expect it to, my initial thought is, oh, I wonder how I can work around this, or if I even need this package at all. Yash will just go package it and file a PR. Like the boundary between our code base and a package and the browser and all of these pieces are just things that like it just changes which like repo he's working in, not whether or not he can solve the problem. Like he doesn't immediately go into workaround mode when there's a problem. He goes into fix mode always. And it's really, really cool. It's not a thing I've seen really ever now that I think about it, especially for somebody who's like younger. It's a really exceptional skill. And like of the external PRs that the T3 chat team has filed, Yash is getting up there with Julius already, which is kind of crazy. I'm scared to know, but also excited. Like the amount of things Yash has fixed for our markdown parsing is crazy. Yeah. And just like everyone does everything, and the result is really cool shit. Thank you, Aiden, for the Prime sub and Void for the 15 months of support. Voice on T3 chat's a thing that we have like on the like radar, but we really want to get the mobile app good first and use that as the platform where we start figuring out voice. Yep, YouTube chat is less broken right now. It was so broken before though, so I'm scared. Delete all chats except pinned. This is a thing we should definitely figure out. I want to make it easier to manage your chat history, and I really want profiles and temp chats. Those are going to be the things I really push. Discord note? I pushed to Discord. Oh, I didn't. I have it here. I forgot to hit enter. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. How much code sharing between desktop and native? Almost none. To be fair, a lot of the things that make the product hard are server-side things and data management things, and most of that is resolved in ways that can be either copy-pasted or is just hitting the same infrastructure. But in terms of like any UI code, that will not be shared between them, like maybe an SVG or two. But it will be hard to find any 2 lines of like JSX that are the same between web and mobile. Of course, Infinite Red's helping with the mobile app. Thank you, Pewdie Bird, for the Prime, as well as Grunzen here for the 9 months of support. Comics is working great in React Native. It effectively is just a like fetch wrapper at that point. Let's open all of these up quick. Close, close, close. Okay. I think I have everything I need to start this one. I have a big swig of water. In some ways, hydration is part of the problem. I also really like Guillermo's explainer. It's probably what I'll be leaning on the hardest. Thank you, Grunzen, for the tier 1 for 9 months, and Last Coyote with the Prime. Appreciate y'all a ton. You can't get background play to work on the mobile app? Okay, that is fair. So what I will sometimes do, as cringe as it is, I will use YouTube on mobile for the live stream, and I will open up Twitch chat for the like streamer on like the Twitch app, but I'll switch it to chat only mode. It's like a couple toggles in and it's really annoying, but I'll just have chat on the Twitch chat on the phone. And I'll watch on YouTube because it's so much more stable. I fucking hate Twitch mobile. It's so bad. I tried so hard when I was there to fix it. I swear. I worked my ass off. Is there another third-party client that's good? I am going to look deeply into this, and if it's open source, I would be I'd be down to contribute. I'm assuming it's closed source, though. Oh, wait. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, no, it's Flutter. Man. I can't win ever. This could be. I'm still going to try it. Like, I'm going to install it. I'm going to give it a shot. I will always try a Flutter app. installing it now. I'll play with it after stream. It has really good reviews. There's a chance it's decent. Like, I'll be real. I'm not going to deduct points because it's in Flutter. If anything, I would do the opposite. Like, I would be impressed if they made a good app in Flutter. Was you building your Minecraft world? Who? I love me a good, well-disguised treehouse in the jungle biome. Some ordinary gamers did a video on ads hacking phones. Interesting. I'm assuming just Android. Mudahar's grown on me for the most part. He has his ups and downs, but I'd say for the most part, I quite enjoy him. He defended the fuck out of me recently on Twitter. That was cool. Colin Compose, I am okay with. It seems much like the whole Jetpack Compose ecosystem seems a lot more focused on improving DX without compromising quality rather than rethinking how things are built. I haven't seen much in terms of the iOS side of it. I know there's something there, but in terms of rethinking Android DX without compromising on the actual output code, I think there's a lot of potential there. You had burnout. It's also possible to do everything yourself and things. Yeah, I still struggle with this all of the time. Like getting better at delegation and also helping people get better on things like when you are better at something than someone else on the team, your instinct will always be, I should just go do it. But learning when to push back on that and let your team get as good as you and eventually get better than you, it's a challenge. The imposter syndrome thing is a good thing. And this isn't going to click for a bit. It's going to be really hard to like get this deeper in you. If you feel like you're underqualified, you're in the right place because that means you get to learn really, really quickly. If you don't feel underqualified, you aren't pushing yourself hard enough. If you feel like you're one of the smarter people in the room, you should find a better room. Right now, this feels bad. In the not so distant future, you're going to miss it. You should always be pursuing that feeling. As weird as that sounds, because it feels bad, the pain means you're growing. I do own an iPad. I barely use it. I upgraded to the like most recent Pro thinking I would use it more, as I do every few years, and I still didn't. Yeah, thanks for the link. I think I have this one saved, but I will open it regardless, just in case I don't. Oh, Kotlin Compose still does a canvas. Interesting. I would need to see some apps using it on mobile. Yeah, I saw the Ghosty nonprofit. That was a good call. I'm sorry, Ed. I'm really sorry. I think I have replay on Twitch. If not, you can go to the YouTube and scroll back a little bit to see my response. I am sorry about that, though. That does suck. Didn't miss any monetization or anything here, right? Cool. It's not up here. I did. Yeah, sorry about the timing on that, Ed. Do I think with the right scaffolding, you could build an entire app using AI? I think it depends both on the scaffolding, but also on the type of app. Replay on Twitch is not enabled. Let me see if I can find a setting to enable that quick. I have it available. Stream Rewind is here. Oh, allow Turbo and channel subscribers to rewind. That's silly. That's very Twitch of them. It is enabled, thankfully, but yeah, you have turbo and don't see it. Yeah, that's annoying. YouTube worked. Okay, Eddie, I hope that was useful info, Ed. Let's get started on this one. I need to do my offset. 0, 0, 37. Let's do 15. Out of set. Oh shit, Shamu, thanks for gifting the sub over to Ed so we can rewind here and not deal with ads. Yeah, thank you, Nemesis, for the 5 months, and Shamu for that gift. And I hope I gave you a good answer, Autumn. It really depends on the app idea. There are certain apps that just don't work for that. Yeah, so you are asking what the offset is. I use that because I record on my camera separately, so I have the full 4K quality. And yeah, I like having the source like vlog file that my editor FaZe can use however he wants to. The phone exploits iOS and Android. Oh god. Cool. I did not see this. I do know Prisma's improved a lot with 7, so I'm excited to see that. I don't know why it thinks you're a Banovator. I'm gonna tell it you're good. I am curious. You guys are very good at distracting me. Jesus. Interesting that the Drizzle bun version isn't meaningfully better than the Node one, and that Prisma actually does slightly worse in bun. That part is fascinating. Yeah. Interesting. Nice one, Nick. Very sly. Very sly of you. 29 months, holy crap. Quite the late stream. Might be posting things inspired by my tweets. Oh boy. Oh boy, good luck. Thank you, XPT, for the resub as well. Oh, Brandon gift subbed you and you renewed it. Appreciate that. DeFrandel with the Prime. Thank you all. Let's get started with this. Yeah, oh, the low latency on 5 minutes on Frost Day. No low latency mode. Messaging feels slow. Interesting. I'll play with that later. I'm excited to try it. Marker. Oh shit, Pietro, thanks for joining T3 Club over on YouTube. Appreciate you. We're gonna start with React got hacked. Let me rename that here to cool. And we got everything we need. Let's do it. I feel like something's off with my desk layout right now. Like it's not quite how I normally have it. But I'm too lazy to figure out and get it right. So we'll just go with that. Okay. I think I'm ready to go. Sadly, this one isn't clickbait. React got hacked, and it's pretty bad. This is the React team published an update already. I'll start from here. On December 3rd, a CVE went public. How do I want to frame this part? On December 3rd, a CVE regarding React went public, showcasing an exploit that was possible in versions 19, 19.1, 19.11, and 19.2 of React. This is a bug that affects, this is an exploit that allows for the server component flight protocol, which is how data is passed between the backend and the front end, to be hijacked to allow for remote code execution on the server. This is basically as bad as it gets. Not even basically. It got a 10 for the severity score in the official ZVE. This is as bad as it gets. It's one of the worst exploits that we've ever seen in the modern web. And there's a lot of depth to it, and there's a lot of depth to and the story of how it was found, how it could be exploited, the people who have already been affected, and most importantly, the entire industry working together to try and prevent this from affecting users is a really impressive story. I actually chose to delay my coverage a little bit because raising awareness of the exploit itself could cause as much damage as it resolves, because people knowing how to do this exploit is scary. People like poor Eduardo have already been hacked as a result of this, which is terrifying. It is worth noting that if you're on a major web provider like Cloudflare or Vercel, there's a good chance. It is worth noting that if you're on a major web provider like Cloudflare, Vercel, or Netlify that's more in the know for the React world, they have firewall mitigations that mitigate most of the risk. There is still potential they can be worked around, which is why you really, really, really should update to the latest version of React for the miner that you're on. But since Eduardo here wasn't on Vercel, he was on Hetzner, he ended up getting hacked pretty bad. There is so much to dive into here, from how the exploit was found to how it affects people to what we can do to prevent things like this going forward. But first, I want a good transition, actually. I have no good transition for the ad spot here. Just roll it quick and we'll start. I have no good transition for the ad spot here. Just roll it and we'll cover the rest in a sec. Perfect. Let's make a new scene. Hate that. Come on. Cool. Okay, cut to here. There's a couple of key questions I want to make sure we answer through this. How does it work? How is it found? What is affected? And how do I fix it? Excited to dive into all of these with you guys. But first, of course, we need to talk about how it works. Guillermo did a pretty good write-up on this. The current code name for the exploit is React to Shell, because it lets you abuse the React protocol to get shell level execution, which is terrifying. Yo, FaZe, good to see you. I don't even know what's the secret, but... Oh, FaZe managed to cut the videos without noticing the cuts in the final recordings? Oh, yeah, he's just a fucking god. That's how. Anyways. This strange data structure is responsible for many sleepless nights this week across the industry. This is the now infamous React to Shell payload as discovered by Lachlan Davidson, now widely circulating. It's a small thing, but I do love how much they're trying to get positive, credit to the person who found this. that dev could have went and abused the hell out of this and done terrible things without disclosing it, and it would have taken forever for people to even notice. I wanted to provide my point of view on the attack, how it came about, and what we're doing, as well as the lessons learned. So that payload that he linked is this, which doesn't look too weird if you've seen the payloads inside of like server components when things are being passed to and from the server in a modern server component React app. You might hear me saying server component and server a lot, and there's a reason for that. And no, the reason isn't because this is Next.js specific. You'll understand the reasons very soon. But here we see the resolved model payload. It just has a then on it, which is how it serializes promises. And then in here, this fourth section has a console log in it, which is very, very specific. I think we need to do a tiny overview of React server component stuff so you can better understand how an exploit like this can happen. Linux create next app at latest. Okay. I have a really complex Next.js app here where we have, I have a really complex Next.js, I can't talk today. I just set up a really complex Next.js app. As you can see, this is so complicated. I want to just demo some of the cool things in server components that make this all matter. Let's say we have some data in here that we want to have come in later because it takes some time. I'll make a function slow component. And it's going to be async because it's a slow component because it has to do things. So in the slow component, we'll await that second and then render slow component. Cool. I'll make this like 3 seconds instead for a better demo. I'll put that in the page. And now when I refresh, error in input stream. Interesting. What's it mad about? Oh, it just took a sec to like re-flog itself. So watch what happens. I just opened it. 1, 2, 3, then it works. We have to wait for all of the async things to be completed before it can generate the HTML that it sends down to the user. But this is where server components have some really cool superpowers. If we put a suspense boundary around the slow component, watch what happens when I load the page now. It says loading there, and then the rest comes in. And whenever I refresh, sometimes it gets a weird dev debug error because I'm in Firefox. But here it's loading, we wait, and then the content comes in. It lets you have some things that get responded with immediately and other things that take time. And part of how it does this is effectively serializing the data that needs to come in later. Here, it's much more focused on like the React like component protocol and the actual elements being snuck into the page. You can look at the JS and it effectively is loading another element in invisibly and then using a tiny JS payload to swap it into the right place in the DOM, which is really cool and interesting, but that's not the part that this exploit touches on. Let's say we have a button component that needs some data before it can render. Export function some button. And this button needs a value that is a string. And it will show that value when we render it. This value will say has to be fetched somewhere and take some time. So I'll make a fake server function. It's like function async function get slow data. Here we'll await and then return slow data. Just kill this component. And then, actually, I need to make this a client component. Use client. So the easy thing I could do here is in here, await get slow data. So like const data equals await get slow data, and then pass it to the button component. But then this has to be async. I can't really determine anything there. What's really cool with server components is you can pass down a promise. So if I pass this down, instead of value string, it's value, but it's a promise for a string instead. What I can do differently is pass that directly. I grab some button. And now I'm passing this promise. But I can't do anything just with the promise. If I try to render that, it's not going to work. So I can do a couple different things. I could do the fancy like use effect, use state to get it, but there's also just use. Look at that. It all figured itself out. So now I have the data from using this promise. You get the idea. But since it's literally just a promise, I can go a little further, like use effect. And now I have this use effect that will only run when value changes, which it won't because it's a promise. This promise gets passed down to the client component, and then you can do things with it. So if we look at the terminal here, you will see after the promise loads, which takes a few seconds, you get the promise results slow data because I just passed a promise from the server to the client. You cannot convince me this isn't cool as fuck. It's so cool. The fact that you can take a promise or data or work being done on the server, pass it to a client component, and then await it on client, have use as a way to like, and what use does here is it is suspending until this promise is resolved. So if I comment this out and instead have data, set data as use state, and then I set the data when we get it, I could have a different case here where it's on client. If no data, return loading, I can now kill the suspense boundaries here. And something broke in the DOM. There we go. I think that's cool as fuck. The fact that you can take a promise and pass it to a client component and use it how you would want to is incredible. Obviously, you shouldn't do it this way. Like we have the primitives built in to do it better, like const data is use, and now we can just kill this state, so it will always exist now, which is another one of those cool differences, because instead of having the different states in this component, what this does is it prevents this component from rendering until the data has been resolved. It's so cool. These patterns are great. There's a reason that the React team has put so much time into this. But in order for all of this to work, in order to have the concept of like serializing a promise from server to client, you have to make a protocol for it, because web standards don't have a concept of serializing a promise. You can't even encode a promise in JSON. You have to do something with it if you want to use it. That was bad wording. If you want to do things like this, you can't just rely on JSON. It's not that simple. You need to do more. You need to make your own protocol, which is what React did with the flight protocol. It's a big part of how these things being passed from server to client and also client to server were able to work. There is one last important piece, which is how the form data and actions behave. So I'll make another component in here, function form example. I just made this really basic form example component. Let me make this look a little better. Div. Cool. There we are. Really complex form here. I can type something in here, and can I disable autocomplete? What's the easiest way to like tell one pass to stop fucking coming up? Prevent one password from auto-filling this form. Okay, that seems simple enough. Yeah, nice, cool. So we have our form, we have this input, and then submit. And if I type something here, like something, and hit submit, work is happening. But if I go over here, you'll see form data has this action identifier and name : something. Obviously, this comes through with the form data because this is the form, and when you submit it, it goes to the server with the contents of the form. But what the fuck is this thing? What's this action ID empty string value? This is how React allows you to do cool things like write an action in line in this form. So the server code that gets executed when you submit this form is identified by the server by putting a hidden field in this form that is passed by the client to the server when you fire it. Because if you had 3 different forms and all of them are posted to the same URL, how is React, and in this case Next, going to identify which is which? The actions protocol is a big part of how it does it. So if we actually look at the DOM here, you will see in this form, there's more going on than just the things we wrote. We have this hidden input, type is hidden, name, action ID, all of that. This is the way that the data, or this is how the right function on the server is identified from what's submitted on the client. Otherwise, there'd be no way to link these things together. Oh shit, Rick's here. These are the complex layers that have enabled a CVE like this to happen. Not that like these things are inherently bad and insecure, more that new things had to be invented to allow for these patterns to exist. Like let's say you had some data in this component, like const random value equals math.random. And then I want to use this here. I want to log the value I got there. Ooh, what lint rule? And that's an impure function during render. Cool. Makes sense. Well, let's say hypothetically that was allowed, and I wanted to have that when I submit. It has this random value here, but in this case, it didn't come through as form data. Interesting. I thought it would. I thought that would be auto-bundled. Would it not? I thought that would be included in. Was there some change I'm not familiar with? Yeah. I shouldn't have to bind. Check the network tab. That's a good call. This include it. Name, content. Oh, this looks like it, yeah. And if I comment those out, will that still be included? It will not. Cool. That's what I thought. They're just filtering it here so it's less messy. Try logging before the await. I think this is all I need to demo this with. We're good. Cool. Yeah. One more quick example of how this can get messy. If you have some value in the body of this component and you want to use that down here, how does it know what that value was? Because it's not in the form and the form is submitting. So we want to have the right random value for when this ran. So what React will do is it will quietly embed a hashed version of this inside of the component. Let me save and see all of these new fields that appeared. What's happening here is it's serializing an encrypted version of the data that exists in this closure, embedding it in the form, and then that gets submitted up when you hit submit, like any data in a form does, where the server can decrypt it and effectively recreate the state it was in when you defined this function. It allows for the intuitive behavior to work, which is I have some value here, I define an action, I call this value in this subclosure, and it works. But you need to have that data there in order to recreate the state, because this component run for this specific instance that you're seeing doesn't exist on the server after it sent the response. So it has to be recreated when you run your action. And this is super, super cool for a bunch of reasons. One of the biggest is you don't need JavaScript on for it to work, because we're just using traditional form data. And if your server turns off and back on, or you're using serverless or anything like that, it just works as expected. It is incredibly impressive that this chaotic looking solution, when you look at the DOM here, gives such a simple and intuitive developer experience that also composes really well too. I'm very impressed with this stuff. I was skeptical at first, but there was a lot of use cases like, let's say that instead of this being a form, this is a row in a table and you want to have a delete button. Instead of having to pass the ID of the deletion every single time and having to either put that in the form and it doesn't work with Node.js, or having to call a specific function with the right ID at the right time, it just exists as part of the component render, and the action can just be a delete click. It makes a lot of things like that way simpler, and simple makes maintaining your code base and scaling your code base way easier. It's a good thing. These are hard things that were invented by the React team in order to enable better developer experience. But at the core of all of this is that flight protocol, which allows for things other than just form data and JSON to be sent up and down and to encode other things in those payloads. So if we go back to this payload that Guillermo had posted from Lachlan, the dev who figured this all out, you'll see here we have our initial payload, and then we have this key 1 that has a value of then map, then length, yada, yada. The thens are here because this is a promise being serialized over the wire, which allows you to know on the client side, okay, if there is more data coming, it will be in this rough shape. I can wait until that data comes here. And also the same roughly on the server. So what makes this payload so special? I'll come back there. Here is the most minimal possible working exploit to take advantage of this. Status resolve model, reason 0. We have the response prefix of console log, and then a constructor in the form data getter. So how does this work? If this body sent to any server running the vulnerable flight code, like a modern Next app, the console log string will be evaluated server side. That string can do virtually anything. Run programs, extract secrets, make network calls. In the case of poor Eduardo here, get root on his machine and start Bitcoin mining on it. The two key ingredients of the exploits 0 and 1 are called chunks in flight lingo. The entry point of the exploit is, as I foreshadowed earlier, flight's key and awesome capability to stream promised data. The syntax for that is the at in the $@ at 0 chunk. It's saying that 0 is a promise. So what is the resolve model thing? It's a genius piece of the exploit. While flight is intended to transport user objects, Lachlan found a way to confuse React. He's essentially expressing internal state, which is an object that's supposed to be private and contains React's internal bookkeeping. This is similar to the stuff I was showing where it's doing the form identification and passing this data in for you. It's how React keeps track of the state on client so that it can recreate it properly on server. Anytime React has to represent an in-flight object, it uses an internal data structure to keep track of the status, and resolve model means that the value is ready to be used. The key to the hack is the then piece. In JavaScript, if an object quacks like a promise, which means it has a then it's treated as a promise. Since we used this syntax, React will eventually await the data. To abuse this machinery, we set then, the $1 : then, which will then be called recursively. This is where Flight's glaring omission happens. The colon syntax is designed to introduce references between user-defined objects, not to access the internal machinery of the JS runtime itself. A lot of exploits like this in JavaScript land are people accessing proto or the prototype objects similar ways. But if you're freely able to access those, that's a smoking gun for this type of vulnerability. The patch was to introduce a hasOwn property call here to make sure that the value that we are decoding hasn't been modified or had these things overridden in any meaningful way. This is the primary safety omission in React, and it's a fundamental one. Is comparable to an out-of-bounds memory access in C or use after free. Once we flow React into resolving the chunk, it's initialized with a hijacked fake _ response. The next key of the attack is to access a code evaluation mechanism. You'll notice the attack uses a value that references a $B, which stands for blob. Well, in this case, blob value then. Why did the attacker choose to represent a blob? In the React code base, there's a couple lines that look like this, where we have a blob and we take from the form data, we .get on it with the blob key. Now that the attacker is controlling the form data as well as prefix, all that's left is to get the .get to evaluate arbitrary code and then blob key to support it. And this is the last key to this puzzle. In JavaScript, there are two basic mechanisms to evaluate arbitrary code, eval and new function. But neither are present here, right? Except for this mysterious get : $1 : then : constructor piece. By accessing the then property, we're getting access to an instance of a function. And the JavaScript happily lets us access its constructor. Once again, something that could be prevented by a hasOwn property check. The final exploit ends up semantically looking like this. Function console.log. Yeah. Get is always called with prefix plus ID. Okay. Since they're passing this in through the prefix, and the way that this is executed on the server side is prefix plus ID, adding the random content to the end of your exploit would cause the syntax to break. So they always put the comment syntax here, because then when the ID gets added after it's resolved as a comment, it gets ignored. One of the many clever layers here, as Guillermo said at the top, juxtaposition of a glaring omission of a safety check combined with a stunningly brilliant mechanism to exploit it. The solution's like a brain teaser, a riddle to test your hacking skills, or a capture the flag type of exercise. This is another instance of not trusting user input. It's so important to have every single layer you possibly can when a user is submitting data to your server and you are doing things based on it. This one was sly and subtle. It would have been very hard for anyone to see this. It's pretty impressive when you think about it, how long React 19's been out for, how many people are building on it, that no one has noticed this yet. It's a very complex exploit to figure out the execution pipeline within the React Flight protocol deeply enough to find this one edge and sneak things through. It really is a genius exploit. So we've now covered how does it work. We've roughly covered how was it found. Lachlan was a god digging deep in it, and thankfully went through all of the correct reporting chains to get this identified and fixed. The report was privately disclosed way before the public one, and people were, and the React team as well as the React team was working really hard the React team worked really hard to collaborate with various vendors that do a lot of hosting for modern React applications in order to get this stuff handled as much as possible on the server side. The problem is that the issue fundamentally lives within React. So all you can do on the server is try and identify, or take on that. Since this problem lives so deeply in React itself, the best you can do outside of it on like the firewall level is try your best to identify payloads that match this shape and prevent them. But if another shape is discovered by someone exploiting this, the firewall checks cannot really protect you from it. So they did their best and took the existing shapes and things we know about the exploit, and all of the major web providers that have Next as a first-class citizen have done their best to block this all on a firewall level. So there's a good chance you're safe even if you haven't updated. That said, make sure you're on the latest, make sure you're on the latest patch version, like 19.1.2 or 19.2.1, because this has been fixed in all of the latest updates for React that were just pushed. And for the sake of poor Ricky, who hasn't slept in a week, please, please make sure you update. Sorry, let me clean up chat a little. Cool. Anyways. So we covered these. Now we should talk about what is affected. Obviously, all of the demos I've been doing here have been Next.js. That does not mean this only affects Next. This exploit affects anything using React server components as recommended by Meta, because the exploit exists within the way that data is encoded and decoded for server components. The vulnerability is present in 19.0, 19.1, 19.1.1, 19.2 for React Server DOM Webpack, React Server DOM Parcel, and React Server DOM TurboPack. And these are used in everything from React Router to Waku. They are not used in Tanstack Start because Tanstack Start does not use server components yet. But if they had introduced server components, it would likely also be affected. 19.01, 19.1.2, and 19.2.1 have all remediated this. So if you're on any of these versions of React, you're good. And if you're on 18, you're fine. You should be able to update your app trivially if you're on any of the affected versions. You just change to the right, or you just change the latest patch and you're fine. It's very easy to mitigate if you can actually change the code that is deployed, thankfully. Yeah. Next, React Router, Waku, Parcel /RSC, Vite.js plugin RSC, and RWSTK are all affected. And as they say on the React blog, they've worked with a number of hosting providers to apply temporary mitigations. You should not depend on these to secure your app, and you should still update immediately. I know your next question. But Theo, I'm not even using server components, so I'm fine, right? Sadly, or how do I put this? Man, I'm in the middle of recording a video and you're out here being a bitch. I want to make long chats work better too, but I want to make my videos better too. And I can only afford to do those things if I can make my bills paid with my videos. Please stop being fucking annoying when I'm in the middle of recording. You have a 10-minute timeout. You can come back when you're ready to be good. Let me take on this. I know what your next question is going to be. I don't use server components, so I am good, right? Depends on the tools you're using and if server components are enabled at all. Because you can take an app that's all client components, and if it has a server renderer at all running on a server that's yours, or Vercel's, Cloudflare's, Netlify's, whoever's, you can still hit this flight endpoint and trigger things. So if you're not using server components, but you are using one of these late versions that includes any of the packages that were listed here, any of these that are able to do server components, you are potentially vulnerable and you really, really should update. Seriously, if you're on any of these versions or know anybody, or seriously, if you're on any of these versions or know anybody on any of these versions, be annoying until they update. This is one of the few times that you can be a righteous, reply guy, obnoxious asshole. If you're on one of these and have not updated, you need to now. I can't emphasize this enough. It is very, very important that you update to the latest version as aggressively and soon as possible. They also posted a timeline, which is really cool. Lachlan originally reported this vulnerability via the Meta bug bounty on November 29th. And by the 30th, the researchers at Meta had confirmed and began working with the React team to fix. Literally 5 days later, not even, this went public. That is a crazy turnaround time. To go from initial reporting to fixed, worked with all the providers, and publicly disclosed is insane. I have a lot of respect to them for going public with the disclosure as early as they did too, because it's all in open source stuff, and they wanted to make sure people take the need to upgrade seriously. But it's also a tough balancing act, because if you share enough detail of the exploit, you're giving misaligned people a nice edge where they can learn how to do the exploit from the resources that you provide. And if those people are faster than the people doing the patching, they're screwed. But finding the right balance of disclosing enough to make sure the severity is understood without giving usable reproductions that people can then go abuse, it's a tough balance. And I think they got it as right as they could. But at the same time, poor Eduardo here was hacked. We'll go to a terrifying email from Hetzner. NetScan detected. My server was blocked and a botnet was using my IP to attack others. I dug into the logs and I found the anatomy of the attack. CPU usage is at 361%. There's this random process running wild and a bunch of connections to IPs in the Netherlands. It wasn't a random SSH brute force. It was inside his Next.js container. The malware was sophisticated. It renamed itself Nginx and Apache-S to look like web servers. It even had a killer script that hunted down other hacker miners to kill the competition. Wild. Before we do that, FaZe cut this right after I was talking about the disclosure stuff. Even Aiden, who has been giving a lot of arguably deserved shit to the React Next teams historically, said that this was a world-class demo on how to handle critical vulnerabilities in large-scale open source. They did really well. They did this all right. Cool. Cut that back slightly. I'll also do the bug bounty thing in a bit too. Actually, I'll do that one now. And I'll cover that exploit. Anyone have a link to that announcement that they're increasing the bug bounty? I love the insert several options here, RCE. I know Malta posted about the new bounty. Let me find it through him quick. Here it is. Cool. One more piece of them doing this all responsibly. They put out a new, or one more piece of Vercel and Meta doing this responsibly. Malta, CTO Vercel just announced that they put out a new dedicated HackerOne program for people who are finding ways to bypass the CVE protections they put on the firewall. Again, you're only safe if you update to the latest version of the package, but ideally, but if you can't or haven't, the firewall is the only protection. They did their best to make it as safe as possible, but since it's a layer put around this really unsafe thing at the core, if you can find a way around it, the exploit is effectively still active, and that's why they put out this bounty, because if you find one of those exploits, you can make 50K by telling them about it, or you can go exploit it yourself, which was what happened to poor Eduardo here. Let's break down how he got hacked. Poor guy. I woke up to a terrifying email from Hetzner. NetScan detected. My server was blocked and a botnet was using my IP to attack others. I dug into the logs and I found the anatomy of the attack. He looked at HTOP and saw his CPU usage was crazy, this random process running wild, and connections to an IP address in the Netherlands. My server wasn't serving my app anymore. It was mining crypto for someone else. The culprit wasn't some SSH brute force. It was in his Next.js container. The malware was sophisticated. It renamed itself to Nginx and Apache S so it would look like a web server. It even had a killer script that would hunt other hacker miners and kill them so that his would get priority. The root cause is that the Next.js CVE exploit almost certainly was what was used here. He was running on Next 15.5.4 behind Cloudflare DNS, but the recent fix on Cloudflare DNS didn't work. No, the Cloudflare DNS isn't going to put up a firewall on your Next app on Hetzner for you. No, not reasonable to expect that. But regardless, you should have updated. This is, again, you really need to update. The Docker container was running as root. Coolify deploys like this when using Nix packs, and I never changed it. That is just how Nix packs work by default from my understanding, but that is bad. His Next app was deployed as root, which means if you exploit the Next app, you now have root. So because of the user root, the malware could install cron, systemd, and persistent scripts to survive reboots. So it's able to infect the whole server from a single Next.js Docker. The hacker installed a whole tool set in the instance. This Apache installer, that's fake, of course. The cron root, which would set up a cron to persist the exploit, and the c.json, which was the wallet config, which is where the money should be dumped when it mines. Fix, kill the container, scrub the host, extract the malware for analysis. Real fix in the Docker file. If you're deploying node Next, do not use the default root. You must create a custom user and use that user instead. Check your containers now. It's important. If you're running Next.js in a container in a server somewhere, please go check this. Even if you're not on an exploitable version, it's very useful to go check. But the reason I was bringing this up now is how much money was made by the hacker. This is somebody who chose to hack instead of disclose. To be fair, they are using a hack that already exists and is public. They're not setting any novel information, but they are exploiting it. And through all of their use with this, there's a wallet that the money gets dumped to. Since it's on blockchain, you can look at how much money they've made. $4.26 a day. So once again, if you do manage to find a novel exploit here, your options are maybe make $4 a day by using it in breaking the law, or crazy, report it to HackerOne to Vercel and potentially get paid $50,000. That's, in my opinion, a much better deal. And that's why they put this up, because it's important that they make the reward for reporting meaningfully better and more noble than the reward for hacking. So that's a good call. I'm happy that they put this out there. All very good. But I did say one other proper noun there that I want to dive into a little more, which was Cloudflare. Specifically, that the expectation of the Cloudflare DNS fixing this didn't work. Cloudflare DNS should not fix it. Cloudflare's firewall in front of workers tried to fix this, but that had its own issues as well, which you might have noticed when Cloudflare went down yet again. Yes, Cloudflare has gone down again. This time, it is also React's fault, similar to when they DDoS themselves with the use effect, but none of the React code caused it this time. It was their attempt at mitigating this potential exploit. There's around, they said 25 minutes of total impact. My measurement said closer to like 35 to 40. Regardless, Cloudflare was effectively down, including Cloudflare.com, which couldn't be loaded, which was crazy. The issue was not caused by a cyber attack on Cloudflare systems or malicious activity of any kind. Instead, it was triggered by changes being made to their body parsing logic while attempting to detect and mitigate an industry-wide vulnerability that was disclosed this week in server components. You can see how big the hit was to their requests. The web application firewall provides customers with protection against malicious payloads, allowing them to be detected and blocked. To do this, Cloudflare's proxy buffers HTTP request body content in memory for analysis. Before today, that buffer size was set to 128K. And as part of their work to mitigate this exploit, they rolled out an increase to the buffer size to 1 megabyte, which is the default limit allowed by Next, so that they could protect all customers. Because if they're only parsing 128K of those requests, the exploit could be deeper, they could miss it. So they increased the buffer size to a meg so that they could parse the whole thing and identify the bad traffic. It's being rolled out by their gradual deployments. During rollout, we noticed our initial web application firewall testing did not support the increased buffer size, as the internal test tool was not needed at that time and had no effect on customer traffic. We made a second change to turn it off. This one was implemented with their global config system. It does not perform gradual rollouts. Rather, it propagates changes within seconds to the entire fleet of servers in the network. It is already under review due to the outage they had on the 18th of last month. It seems more and more like this particular system needs to be entirely rewritten if it's caused 2 major outages in under a month. In the FL1 version of the proxy, under certain circumstances, the second change of turning off the web application firewall rule for testing tools caused an error state that resulted in 500 HTTP error codes to be served from the network. Yeah, this Lua file failed to execute because it was trying to index a field that had a nil value. Okay. The cause of this outage was primarily their kill switch system, which is how they disable things. But they've never before applied a kill switch to a rule that had an action of execute. The problem was, since they killed this rule, the rule result.execute doesn't exist anymore. But since rule result.action was still execute, this Lua code would run. And this Lua code would set execution.results to rule set results, the number of this results index. But that means it was trying to get results index on this object that didn't exist because they killed it. And the result of that was that it would hard crash. Fun. More reasons to use type-safe languages. Lua's a language. If you want to read this whole incident report, it'll be linked in the description as always. Cool. I think we covered all of the critical questions here. How does it work? Exploiting Flight. How is it found? Somebody going deep in the internals of Flight. In fact, their repo is hilarious. They haven't done a more traditional formal write-up yet. They were waiting for things to be patched, but their TLDR is beautiful. This syntax gives you access to a chunk that you can then plant a custom then on the object. The JS runtime automatically unravels those nested promises, anything with a dot then. We now re-enter the parser, but with the control of a malicious fake chunk object. You plant things on the underscore response, which lets you access a lot of gadgets when that happens. Insert several options, RCE. Yep. So what is affected? Everybody using server components and on 19, so who's affected? Everybody using React server components or apps that could have React server components. How do you fix it? Update to the latest dot version of Next.js or React, and you're good to go. Just make sure you're up to date. If you are on any of these versions, fix it right now. If you have somebody preventing you at your job from fixing it, yell at them and do it anyways. If they keep preventing you from doing it, hit me up on Twitter and we'll get you a new job. This has to be fixed. Like, if you're a company using one of these React versions, just do the patch update. They made this as easy as possible. Go do it. And this has been a crazy experience all around. It is rare that things like this, or it's rare exploits like these are found. It doesn't say anything about the quality of the engineers building the thing. As you build complex things that solve complex problems, you introduce complex security issues. And everybody who's in another stack or place, like all the PHP guys, the Rails guys, or the client-side rendering people that are claiming that they are holier than thou because their solution doesn't have an exploit like this, just wait. Just wait. There is something like this in almost every complex enough code base. It's just a matter of who has found it. React is an appealing enough target to get really smart people like Lachlan trying to find these types of things. CVs happen. What matters isn't do they happen. What matters is how well do you handle them. This one was handled incredibly well, all things considered. So hopefully we can, as a group, focus less on talking shit and more on making sure the web is as secure as possible, because that's what matters here. Put your opinions aside, put your hatred of React and Vercel and all these other things aside, and make sure we can have a responsible discussion around this type of issue so that we can keep the web as updated as possible. It's a great opportunity for everyone to learn, to get a little more secure with how they implement things. And if you're interested, to learn a bit more about the internals of how all this fancy server component stuff works in the first place. Make sure you're up to date. I got nothing else to say. Until next time, peace, nerds. I think we did good enough with that. I want this one. I want that one. I want that one. And where'd the Cloudflare one go? Cool. Anytime, Rick. Thanks for all the hard work you were doing. I know you guys have been crazy. No worries, Aiden. If he annoyed you, I trust your judgment. And yo, Ricky, thanks for the gift bomb during that. Sorry I didn't acknowledge it when I was filming. I was just locked in on that. Appreciate you a ton. Of course he did. Thank you, guys. Thank you to Frandl for the Prime, XPT for the 3 months of support. Ricky, you don't have to gift again. God damn it. Appreciate you. NMG hitting 29 months. Oh, yeah. Thank you already. We got LM Bick here with the 4 months. R. Kirk with the 9. Ruda was taken, hitting 30. God damn. And CE with the 11 months. It's been a fun ride. You're hitting 1 year soon. Client-side app, assuming the web migration is around the corner, right? We're not a client-side app. We were more client-side before than we are now. We actually moved to server rendering. How's Tansec hosting on Vercel? Fucking miserable. Join our shared Slack channel if you want to see the hell we went through. It was awful. We got also Alistair here with the 4 months. Good to see you, man. Hope you enjoyed the show last night. Seun here with the 8 months of support. Ricky with the gifts. Shale here with the 3 months of support. And then Ricky with the one last gift bomb. Yeah, I'm leaning no on the server rendering. There are reasons for it, but I don't think they matter enough. See, how do you deal with people seeing you as like the wizard who comes from memory? Find smarter people to hang out with. Yeah, DM me. I'll try to get back to it post stream. I have to film ads right after stream, and then I have to do Advent of Code. And if I have any energy, I'll try to catch up on DMs. But like, I'm so behind on shit. It's like a little insane. Doing my best. Cool. That is there. Yeah, moving back to CSR shouldn't be too bad. Oh, good luck, Ricky. Yes, I have a Discord server. Not as active in it as I used to be. Sadly, been a little crazy lately. Suppose we should talk about our move off of Next. Mark and Julius are out hanging with other friends. I really should try to do this when I have them around. I should also check our Slack logs quick so I have more data there. Some people keep asking, like, how does this work for small projects? I don't think in terms of how it works for big or small projects. I think of it in terms of how is it working for us, for the thing we built with it. And the answer is mostly better with some exceptions. Okay, let me switch to here. Make sure there's something proprietary or hidden in here. Let me check ping.gg/t3 chat. Maybe one of these prod promotions will have it in it. I think at least. Maybe not. Not that one. What was it? Does it run API routes as a separate function? Probably this one. Let me ping Gabriel because I want him in here for this one. Cool. Pinged him. Okay, I think I get it now. Yo, Gabriel, I'm trying to figure out how we patch this because both Mark and Julius are busy. Considering delaying the video until I have them here to watch, but if you know enough about the hacks that we have to do to make this work on Vercel, it'd be useful to have you for that. The TLDRs, I understand it, is that the way TanStack bundles the routes by default is a little broken. What even is this patch? Is there something that's different between these two lines? Let me open up. I wish the diff view would show you the actual difference in the lines instead of just showing you the two lines. Like cookie. Is it just that get cookie? No, get h3 event is the one that was added. Okay, so we added get h3 event. Okay, not sure what we're using that part for. Let me ping the guys quick. Okay, they've been hit up. Apparently they're meeting with Puya tomorrow to hopefully figure this all out. I might want to wait for the like main video till then, but I guess I'll talk about the migration and why we did it now. Maybe it'll be enough for the video, maybe it won't. Neither a VPS or straight AWS would help us at the size. The Vercel is more useful at scale, not less. Like it's way more useful to have something like Vercel when you can't run it on a single VPS. Yeah, Fluid's incredible. Ah. Cool. Yeah, Puya is awesome. I can rock with the info I just got. Cool. Nice. I would love to see that blog post. I'm going to record this now, knowing that there are things I'm going to get wrong and things that I'm going to want to like record more of or re-record later. I might throw out this version entirely, but I don't want to feel like I baited you guys to showing up just to not talk about the move. So we'll absolutely be talking about it. Peace, Alistair. Thanks for showing up. Thank you, Sleep on Car, for the Prime. Pierce Codes with the 6 months, and DZ Hohua. Hopefully I got that right for the 2 months of Prime. Appreciate y'all a ton. Marker next to tan stack. Can close all these. Just want to find the PR. Here is the main one. 478 comments. Jesus fuck. I already made the marker, right? Yeah, we did. Cool. We can just get started then. Nice. Yeah. I'm good enough with my hair. I'll deal with it. No, that title is not clickbait. I did actually move off of Next.js. I'm not covering someone else's article or doing this just for fun. It was time for us to move off of Next for T3 chat. This isn't some crazy takedown on Vercel or Next or some gloat. Okay, want to rethink this. I really like to know this isn't clickbait intro, but I feel bad because I just did that one. Whatever, we'll go with it. No, the title is not clickbait. If you go to T3 chat right now, it is no longer being served through Next.js. It is still a great framework that solves a lot of problems for a lot of people, and my decision to move us are. Third time's the charm. I really should have thought through this intro a little more, but we'll go with it. No, the title isn't clickbait. We did actually move T3 chat off of Next.js. There's a lot of reasons for this, and man, it's been a wild journey. I know your first question, what did you move to? TanStack. This was quite a PR. Shout out to Julius for all of the work to make this happen, as well as the rest of the team for the 478 comments on his 14,000 lines added and 10,000 lines removed PR. Yeah, this one was a doozy. There has been a lot for us to do and even more to learn as a result of this migration. And as much as I'm loving TanStack Start, and believe me, we are loving it, it's a very, very good framework that is a solution to a lot of problems that we and many other developers have. There are plenty of catches as well. This was not an easy migration, and the reasons it was hard were not ones any of us would have predicted or expected. We're at the point where we're patching TanStack Start in order to add things we need to be exported so we can actually make this work at our size and scale. It was worth it, though. The reasons why are not the usual. If you're if you're watching this video so you can hear me complain about Next.js a whole bunch, you're in the wrong video. This is not going to be that. If you think we made this move because we are scared of the exploit that I just covered recently, you're probably too bad of a developer to watch my channel, and I would recommend finding another. But if you're interested in a deep dive on how a company shipping to millions of users thinks about their technology stack and makes changes in order to make the best possible product and have the best experience for its developers, stay tuned because we have a lot to dive into here. I want a good transition. I want to think of a really good one for this. As you guys know, Vercel is not paying me anymore, and after this, I sincerely doubt they would want to. So let's hear a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive in. Cool. In order to answer the question, why are we moving off of Next? We first have to answer a more interesting question. Why did we use it in the first place? And this question is actually, in my opinion, more interesting and more complex than the bigger one of why we moved off. When I was building T3 Chat, I had a couple specific goals in mind. I wanted it to be as fast as possible as an application you would use. Like you click things, they happen immediately. You send a message, you get a response as quickly as possible. We really wanted it to feel and be as fast as reasonably achievable by us as a small team. I also wanted it to be scalable in more senses than just it will deploy across as many servers as we need it to for as many users as we have. I also wanted the code base itself to be written in a scalable way where we could add new functionality, we could extend portions, we could add features, we could keep building on it without feeling like we're drowning under the weight of what we had built into. I also didn't want to waste a ton of time trying to build the relationship between the server side and client side, especially because I knew we would be changing the server side a lot throughout. So I wanted to make sure everything would stay in sync relatively well, because our client side logic initially was all about syncing our data, because I put so much effort into our custom sync engine that if the backend and front end ever disagreed, you would be at risk of losing all of your data. So the key pieces that we wanted were scalable design, server client in sync. And when I say in sync, I don't mean our CDN deploys within 30 seconds to 2 minutes of our servers changing. I mean, it's really hard for those things to be out of sync, that whenever you're on our site and you do a thing, the backend and front end are the same version and understand each other. Alongside that, I wanted an easy way to deploy TS in sync. Specifically, I wanted to make sure the server and client were all TypeScript, everything was agreed from the front to the back, and it was easy for us to keep those parts attached. Obviously, I wanted React. Duh. I didn't want server components, though, because I wanted everything to be client-side focused. And most importantly, I wanted to bet on boring tech. I know this doesn't seem very much like me, but the core library that powered most of T3 Chat in its initial version was a beautiful library I still miss all of the time. We were building on top of Next.js, which is a browser standard for storing more data than you can store in local storage. It was meant to replace WebSQL, which sucks because WebSQL is a much better standard, and IndexedDB it's a standard, roughly. But IndexedDB is so unreliable, especially across different browsers, that back in the IE7 days, Dexy was created in order to make it all viable. Dexy is ancient, even if the website doesn't look like it. It's actually weird. I've never seen the website in this state. They redid it recently. And if we go back to when I adopted it, which would have been in January of this year, this is what it looked like. And you can kind of tell it's older. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's old. And in fact, its age was one of the factors that made me really excited to use it because it was super reliable. The only issues I had with Dexy were things that lived underneath it because IndexedDB is a shit standard. I really enjoyed using Dexy. This is the library that powered everything. It was boring, it was old, it was great. All of that said, building my own sync engine was rough, so it ended up being one of the first things we removed. Not Dexy, but the whole concept of us running our own sync. But I was really thinking about all of this when I made the choices I made for T3 Chat. So how does Next play into these? Well, believe it or not, there are a lot of companies that are deploying gigantic Next.js apps without too many issues, especially now with TurboPack finally happening. On top of that, the Next.js way of building and deploying, especially when you use products like Vercel, Netlify, or Cloudflare, tends to scale very well. So it was a pretty easy choice for that. Server, client, and sync. This is one of the biggest things that Next.js gave us. Alongside things like SKU protection on Vercel, where you can make sure the front end and the back end are the same at all times, and our little hacks we did to let you know on client that your version's out of date and you have to refresh, made it real easy to keep things in sync. When I actually wanted to deploy, though, if we were to host the servers one place and the client another, keeping those in sync in time and making the code base easy to work with between the two was non-trivial, unless we used a framework like Next. Even though the backend and front end were very much separate, having them in the same project in the same package JSON made it way easier to deploy, revert, fall back, and keep everything in sync. I have done the thing where you split your backend and front end up, even though they could theoretically be together, and it just makes a lot of random shit way, way harder. Like the amount of times we had to freeze an old deployment or roll back as a result of a migration like this. If you have to go do that in multiple places and hope to keep things in sync, especially if you have a local DB that people are using that you did a migration on, good luck migrating it backwards. It seems like there's some confusion about keeping the front end and back end in sync. I'll make this simple. Let's say you have a front end and a back end. You have a version for each. You are on version 1.0.0 for the front end and for the back end. Now you make a change, and that change affects the signature of data. So you do a minor bump. You make it 1.1.0. In sync means that a user on the old version isn't hitting the new version. In sync means if I have to revert the backend deployment because something went wrong, that a user on the new version isn't hitting the old version. In sync effectively means, in an ideal world, these things are compartmentalized and boxed and tied tightly together. If your front end's on version 1.0.0, your backend is. If your front end's on 1.1, your backend is. You want these to stay in sync because the amount of bugs that occur when your front end and back end are out of sync is absurd. And it is a lot easier if they are served together. So I wanted my deployment solution to let me deploy things in a way that was very well synced and simple. Same with the server and client like relations in general. Don't need that part, just cut that. Yeah. Hopefully you can now understand why these two things are very important to me. I want to have a thing running on my machine, see everything is fine, hit deploy, and have everything still be fine. Especially if we have to worry about regressions, migrations, reverts, and all of those types of things. Having stuff in sync makes life much easier, period. We also wanted to use React. I should not have to justify that one. We use React. Our whole team knows React. The tech that we're building around is all built in and for React. It is a good ecosystem. The performance is fine. The worst performing AI chat app I ever used was written in Svelte. So yeah, framework is not what makes your site slow. If your framework is actually what's making your site slow, you're either God tier dev and shouldn't be talking about it, or you're a terrible dev and also shouldn't be talking about it. And then this bottom piece here. I wanted to bet on boring tech. Whether or not you love Next.js or all the cool things that have shipped in it, if you don't use any of those new things, Next is very boring. And we were not using any of those new things. In fact, one of the better but also worse decisions I made was how we abuse the Next.js router. Since the Next router kind of assumes server and client, where when you navigate to a page, you might have to load the page from the server, trigger some other functions, and then get it on client, the type of snappy, you click and you're there navigation that I was aiming for wasn't super viable with the Next.js router. The Next.js router was super focused on server render, client render hybrid apps, or full server rendered apps, not on client-focused apps. I really wanted our app to fly. Once you load the JS, you click a thing, you're there immediately. So our stack ended up being interesting. Our stack at launch was Next.js, but it also wasn't using the Next router. I hacked in React router. I did some nasty things to make that work. In particular, I set up a rewrite rule that would redirect all URLs that weren't bound to go to the index HTML effective file, because that would allow you to reroute the traffic. And if you go to a URL that doesn't exist because it doesn't exist in the project, like, let me switch to an old version of E3 chat code base. Give me 1 sec to do that. And close these. Cool. Here is all of the routes that we had in our app back when it was still on Next.js. If you've seen the source app directory in a Next project, it's probably full of a lot of different things. Ours isn't. We have API, which has a couple API endpoints, because that's, again, what we were using Next for. We were effectively using it as an easy way to bundle a React client-side app and a TypeScript server-side app together, so they would deploy together, be served together, and stay in sync. So we have our APIs for things like tRPC upload thing, status, server version, and some internal stuff that we were using for migrations for data. That's all been deprecated long ago. And then we had our chat endpoint, which was our main chat. This is what would serve the request that will actually generate the text for your app. We also have this max duration thing, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. Fun hack. But the pages was pretty boring. We have the status page. We have our docs pages for like terms of service, privacy policy, FAQ, security, all that. And then we had the app shell. This is where all of our app was served from. Yes, the whole thing. This is the curse file that defines the entire client-side app. I'm using React Router because I want a great client-first experience. I left that comment. I don't think I have Git Lens working. Let me install it quick. Yeah. This commit was 11 months ago. Beautiful. We also had this for statics, just brute forcing Next.js to always render this as a static page and not server render it ever, as well as this SSR false, which specifically tells Next during both build and when serving this, do not render this on this page. Do not mount this and render whatever HTML comes out. Just render an empty div, and we'll put this in at client later. This file was how I brute forced Next.js to allow me to use React Router, but that's not all, because now we have this static app shell route. But what about the main route? What about like the core page? What about index? What about the chat routes? This doesn't handle the other routes. In fact, it doesn't handle any route, and nobody's going to /static app shell on our app. So how did we handle all of that? Here's where we get into my more hardcore abuse of Next. We hop into the rewrite section here. Routes that aren't in our file-based routing should be handled by React Router. This is the only way to make all of those routes static. Because if we were to dynamically reroute traffic based on what route you're on, that would become server-side. And now we're not getting those client-side benefits I'm aiming for. So we wanted to make sure all traffic that doesn't go to an existing URL, because like if it goes to /API/event, or if it goes to /API/chat, we want it to be rendered with other things. But we also want to make sure all fallback URLs, so like the 404s and everything, go to our static app shell. So here is the hack we have, this app shell redirect, where all sources will be sent to the static app shell unless they have this xtrpc key, because trpc also has a glob pattern. I tried putting it in here originally, didn't work. Since trpc's endpoint can have additional like subpaths, it was impossible for us to get that to work without using custom headers in order to identify which traffic was supposed to be handled by trpc, because otherwise the trpc traffic would be routed to static app shell and wouldn't work. Not fun. I did a lot of weird things in order to make this all work. See, static means static. And then this was 10 months ago, we moved to trpc, fixed trpc queries getting eaten by the rewrites. Yeah. I cannot properly explain how many random bullshit things were caused by this. On one hand, it was less than expected. I'm surprised this worked at all. On the other hand, this was hellish and nobody should do it. If the Next.js router is not the right router for your app, the Next.js is not the right framework for your app, move out of it. As soon as I added this to the code base, I understood that Next.js was not the long-term solution for T3 chat. It was a temp solution until we had a better path that made more sense to us. At that exact time, I started exploring other options. So your next React router, IndexedDB with Dexy, Redis as our DB, mostly just to back up whatever we were doing, and Vercel with Fluid for our runtime. I don't feel like going really deep on Fluid Compute right now. Go watch any of my other videos about it if you want to know more. By March, we were hitting the limits of how I could abuse Redis for this, so we moved this out and replaced it with PlanetScale and left pretty much everything else the same. And then in May and June, we did the convex move. In July, Julia started working on the effect rewrite for the backend. But this whole time, I was thinking in the back of my head, we put ourselves in a weird place using Next for this. What am I missing in chat? The Next team is working on making things better for single-page apps. We'll talk about that later. Around the same time, in March, I was exploring what a rewrite would look like here. Also, Vercel hadn't really put out Fluid yet, so I should remove that. I was looking at how crazy our inference time was because we were doing really long requests for these generations. And the way Vercel was scaling that with their existing compute methods was not great because every user got a dedicated Lambda for every chat. Fluid made that a lot cheaper, but before Fluid dropped, I wanted to make sure we had an exit plan that we could move to Cloudflare if needed, which should be way cheaper, and that we didn't need to be so reliant on Next, because Next wasn't really benefiting us beyond being an easy way to deploy our TypeScript backend and frontend together, and alongside that was causing us problems like these hacks I was doing to force React Router to work. Since we were on React Router, I wanted to stick with React Router, so my next attempt was Remix, which, if I'm being honest, kind of failed. There were a lot of weird things with how Remix deploys on different platforms that made it kind of hard for us to get it working properly on Cloudflare. Around the same time, React Router server version became more of a thing. So the React Router server-friendly edition was something I did explore a lot more and got pretty far with that as well. But I also didn't trust some of the primitives. They hadn't really figured out what they wanted to have for like posts and gets and all of these different solutions for fetching data from a server, defining endpoints, etc. It wasn't quite standard. It was dancing around the standards, and it was really, really poorly documented at the time. And I specifically didn't want to bet on an underdocumented, underexplored technology. So the bet I was making was that a Vite plus Hano app would be our path forward. I ended up independently in March and April rewriting all of T3 Chat to be a Vite Hano app. And went through hell getting it to deploy on Cloudflare. This was around the time that Cloudflare was trying to kill pages and move it into part of workers. And man, talk about underdocumented. Just trying to find a way to have it so the /API endpoint would be served by Hano and everything else would be served by the static Vite bundle required me to reverse engineer shit. I was deep in like output bundles that were generated by Workerd and by Wrangler to try and figure out how assets were being tagged so I could manually redirect traffic to the right place. It was miserable. Trying to get Cloudflare to point to the right traffic at the right place through a single worker definition was so hellish that when I complained, they ended up going out and putting out a bunch of reference material on how to do it right, as well as public repos that, as far as I know, they do actually maintain now. But also, as far as I know, I was one of the first people to get Vite plus Hano for static deployment for your assets, dynamic deployment for your endpoints, working on Cloudflare ever. So I am proud of that. I know I'm the Vercel guy, but I put my time in on Cloudflare and ultimately decided against it because the point of these moves was to get away from these types of hacks and these underdocumented things. And believe it or not, my React Router in Next thing felt less uncertain than all these other paths that I explored because all of these paths were super underexplored by others. And I really did not want to give up my synchronization piece where the front end and back end deploy together and stay in sync together. Oh shit, Mulroy, who recently moved to Cloudflare, is in chat working on making this much better. Let me VIP you quick. Good to see you, man. So, yeah, I didn't like the uncharted territory I was getting into. And then I tried moving a few more things over, and we hit the bundle size limits for Cloudflare functions. Apparently, it's a very common problem in bigger server-side rendered frameworks when you're building on Cloudflare. It is very easy to hit limits on how big the bundles can be. Some of our routes are like 20 megs plus in size, and I think Cloudflare's limits 2. Yeah, the worker size is limited to 3 megs for the free tier and 10 megs for the paid tier. Static assets can be much bigger. So the actual assets that you're serving, using, screwing with is fine. But the JS that executes has a relatively low cap in how big it can get. And these caps are easy to hit with the type of stuff that we're doing, especially once we started doing like image compression on the server side and stuff. Even if Cloudflare supported proper node with native bindings, we would hit these limits. People are asking why serve the static assets from the worker and not the CDN. Not that simple. We were serving static assets from the CDN, but our problem wasn't the static assets. Our problem was the server-side code in the packages we were using on the server side. So it was relatively easy for us to hit this. Any big app is going to hit this eventually, and we hit it as soon as we started moving over. So once again, decided it's not worth the fighting here to get all of this working. I would have to make our deployment system way more complex and create many different workers for many different routes and find some way to manage this all at a higher level. Not only would the front end and back end not necessarily be in sync, the front end and various different endpoints on the back end would no longer necessarily be in sync. I am... I'm trying to decide if I want to time you out or not, Bash Omega. I am good friends with the guy who makes Coolify. It is really cool for the 5 users you have maximum on your services if you think that's a reasonable recommendation. We are talking about production scaling, or we're talking about production services shipping at big scales that need to have dynamic CDN behaviors so that users get their static assets as quickly as possible, served correctly and versioned correctly against the backend. Coolify solves none of those problems, and it makes most of them harder. I did look at things like Porter and CloudFront, and again concluded more work, little gain. And on top of that, we'd either have to run our own dedicated servers and manage breaking traffic across between them during generations, or build our own equivalent of fluid compute on Lambda. Or we could just use Lambda. or we can just use Vercel and have the fluid compute on Lambda benefits, which is what we wanted to do. Again, around this time was when Fluid happened, and it made it a lot harder to justify moving to something like Cloudflare or our own servers. Fluid is really good for these types of things. Watch any of my videos about it if you don't understand. Really like this message from chat. Unless you have dedicated system admins, Vercel sounds like a good choice. Yes. At the time, we had 2 employees, me and Mark, and I'm barely an employee. I have so much other shit to do. Julius was part-time, still finishing up school, but we got him to move here full-time, which was a huge help as well. But our options were limited because we did not have dedicated people running our infrastructure for us. And even if we did, that would slow down our inertia meaningfully. But these were not the only options I explored. I did actually start exploring Tanstack Start at this time. Funny enough, the Tanstack Start port wasn't really started by me. Here was the first attempt at the Tanstack Start PR for T3 chat. Oh shit, I was wrong on the timelines. This was in February. I was exploring other options that early. This one was opened by Tanner himself. He started from my attempt to get React Router working, which you can see here. I was very pumped. I finally got it working. And he used that as a starting point to start moving us over to TanStack. He got pretty far, but concluded that the single page app stuff wasn't quite where we would want it yet, without even asking. He's just like, I want to get this better first. We can talk about this later. And went off and kept improving things on his side. And TanStack Start kept getting better and better until it got where it is today, which is honestly incredible. Apparently there's 1,000 people on YouTube chat right now. Sorry, I'm not checking as much. Jesus Christ. Yeah, there's a lot of you guys. You really wanted to come here for this. Thank you all for stopping by. Yeah. This PR ultimately died because the code base moved way too fast and it was just an experiment. Like, he was building an experimental PR on top of my experimental PR. So anybody saying that we moved right now because of some exploit or whatever, no, we've been exploring this since February and we went live in January. For the vast majority of our time working on T3 chat, we have been exploring other options to figure out how we get out of the Next.js plus React Router mess that I used to get us to our first launch. And even at this point, it felt like TanStack Start was the closest to what we were looking for. It had good concepts of the primitives between the backend and the front end. It had routing that made sense, that gave us the nice file system stuff that I'm 50-50 on. In a lot of ways, I miss traditional routing in a like JavaScript file where you define the routes yourself. But in other ways, file-based routing is really, really nice and useful. It makes things way clearer when you're trying to just find the place that the thing's being rendered from. Also makes bundle splitting significantly easier too. TanStack Start had the right combo of things. And when you go back to what we wanted, which was an easy way to deploy our front end and our back end together with good primitives that stay in sync, TanStack Start is a heavy solution, to be clear, because there's a lot of things in there that we weren't necessarily interested in. But it was also a complete solution built by somebody working really hard on rethinking things from the ground up that wasn't full of all of the tech debt and years of legacy things to maintain compatibility with that Next.js is. On that note, I do need to glaze Next a little bit. I don't think we take enough time to appreciate how incredible it is that Next.js is as backwards compatible as it is. You could upgrade a Next 10 app to Next 16 and have almost no issues. And the few you might have, they write code mods for that you can execute and do that port with. It is a little bit absurd how good the back compat is with both Next.js and with React as a whole. And the work that the Next team does to maintain that backwards compatibility is incredible, and they should be commended for it. They work really, really hard, and they built a stable framework that I do not regret betting on for every other project I've built. They continue to improve it. They continue to maintain it. They continue to give us paths to make our code bases, make our user experiences, and make our lives better by building on top of Next. In fact, I honestly believe if we waited a few more months and I had pushed the Next team a little bit harder on the client-side SPA stuff, we would have gotten to a point where I could have removed React Router, removed a bunch of these hacks, and been happy. But I also really like Tanner and wanted a fresh start. I was briefly considering building my own framework at this point in time, taking minimal pieces from Hano and Fastify, combining that with Vite for rendering the client-side stuff, and trying to build this better, simple, minimal client-side app with server-side TypeScript bound in a way that deploys together thing. And TanStack Start does that all for me. Now, somebody asked about exploits in Next. Tell me about any exploits that you found and vulnerabilities you found in Next.js that aren't literally from the last 5 days that affect all React apps. If you have anything else, let me know. I'm curious, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah. So we evaluated all these options. Got distracted with problems that didn't exist here. Like our app is layers. We have the infrastructure, we have the server side code, the client side code, the components themselves, the data. all of these pieces. The problems that we were encountering at this point were lots of things breaking in my sync engine because I built my own way to keep data in sync, and it was not good. It was actually quite bad. The amount of issues from the sync engine were crazy. Switching to TanStack or Vite or whatever else would not have fixed any of those problems. So that was what I know-lifed. And I spent all of May and a good chunk of June rewriting all of our data layer, sync engine, and everything with Convex. That video is already live. That video is already live if you want to deep dive on what it looks like to do this type of migration. It was hellish. We pulled it off. Then my custom auth layer that was on a forked and abused version of OpenAuth was having some problems, and we really wanted to start adding new auth providers. So the next move was to switch to an auth provider. We went with WorkOS. Questionable migration, overall for the better, and enables a lot of things that we're excited about, but it was a non-trivial migration to say the least. And then finally, we went and did the effect rewrite on the back end because we wanted better observability. All of those things reduced a significant portion of the bugs that users were experiencing and the issues that we were having trying to debug the things users were seeing. But what was left, once we had our traces from effect on the server, once we had a better sync engine all through Convex, the bugs that were left were largely around the weird relationship between our React router client-side app and our Next.js server-side app that were not ever built to work together well. So without even really asking me, Julius just started the TanStack rewrite. And I want to be very clear about this. Julius didn't take all the research and effort I put in, ask me what the best option was, and go with it. I didn't hire Julius to listen to me. I hired Julius to make good changes to our code base and maintain things for us. I hired him to be a good developer, pushing the quality of the project and the app forward. And he independently chose TanStack Start as the correct solution. And I almost entirely agree. There are parts of me that wish we more deeply explored the Vite plus HANA or a Vite plus Fastify solution, because I really do want this to be a client-side app. But TanStack Start does have a lot to offer us, and I am happy with the move. Which I guess leads us to talking about said move. Here's the PR. 14,000 lines added, 10,000 removed, not even counting the pile of follow-up PRs we had to do after in order to try and pull more things. This doesn't even include the patch we had to do after in order to get it like actually working reliably. But this was the core main rewrite that we shipped to beta so that we and a few others could test it, fixed a bunch of bugs. Yeah. Only the first 40 comments are being shown. To see more, switch back to classic page. And due to a large number of changes in the pull request, only one file is being shown at a time. Let me go to Graphite. Unintentional Graphite ad. That's not the right one. I wanted this one. Cool. Unintentional Graphite ad, their GitHub review view, because their GitHub wrapper makes these giant PRs actually reviewable, which is essential when you're doing these types of huge migrations. GitHub won't even open them. It will take a bit because this was a big one, but at the very least, it will eventually render and work. Probably. Might need to move to a Chromium-based browser for this to work as expected. Oh, look, it did actually render with all the comments and everything. Crazy. I bet a lot of those bugs will go away on the Chrome version. Yeah, that's right. Much better. So here we have that actual PR. Thank you for actually working Graphite, unlike GitHub, for looking at something like this. And we have our pile of patches that made certain things work, because nothing works how we expect it to. But the more important parts here are how the new routing works. We got rid of my hacky app TSX. We got rid of that whole front end folder, I believe, for the most part. Let me just pull the latest version here. Okay, check out main. Cool. Reopen 4 times the charm, right? Cool. And now we have our front end TanStack router. Need to npm install fnm use npm install npm run dev. Now my dev server, this should figure out what this is in a second. Reload window. There we go, cool. Now you have our auth result. Now this all works. So one of the many interesting things about TanStack Start is it's not a framework that makes a lot of, how to put this? One of the interesting things about TanStack Start is the way it's a hybrid between generation for files and more traditional inference through TypeScript. You have to have your you do have to have your route files defined in a specific way in order for the type safety to work, but it will automatically do that for you when the dev client is running. And if you change something that's incorrect, it will update it for you in the background. So when you create a new route, just the creation of the new route file will result in it making all of these other subfiles for you, making sure that it exports the route here with the right name. And if I go to new, for example, and I change this to /news, it will create a new route for that for me. Or here, it uses the file name by default. So I change this to news. I'm saving now, and it got auto rewritten by the dev server from Tanner stuff, from TanStack, in order to make sure that this is correct, because TypeScript has no concept of what file you're in. So in order for the routing to be type safe, you have to pass the route you're on. So if you name this file differently, and this is where it gets really fun. If I rename this to news, see that? The file got updated automatically. These are the things that Tanner had to do in order to make sure the full stack type safety worked as expected, and he succeeded. Pretty incredible. So let's go back to our router. We have the get router function. We introduced the convex client so that we can hydrate it, because Julius wanted to have the server side stuff work too, so that we could server render it and client render it with access to the same data. Also sets auth on convex client based on your workOS auth state. Create a query client that will work on server and on client. Connect it with the convex query client. Make a TRPC client as well, because we still use TRPC for a bunch of random data on the server side. And then our create router function here, where we have our route tree, our scroll restoration, context for all the things that the router needs, and then the things that wrap it. These are like our providers for convex, for what is even the client runtime provider? Is that something from Tanner, I'm assuming? No, it's the managed runtime. That is for effect stuff, almost certainly. Yep, that's for effect stuff. And then the TRPC provider that allows our TRPC functions to work. And then props to children, which is where it will render everything else. And then we have our route tree. This file is generated, which is why it's .gen.ts, and it has this comment at the top. This file should automatically be generated. You should not make changes to the files that will be overridden. Awesome. Again, that hybrid of code gen and actual files, where the files in your code base, it's not a rewrite of things on your NPM package like something like Prisma does. And a lot of the people who are building these big complex apps, like our friends over at Axiom, Gabriel and crew, The way routes are declared is so good. I agree. One of the things that makes the way routes are declared so cool is how well it handles parameters being passed. So of course we have our chat endpoint, which is where the chat messages are. We also have chat share, chat index, and chat thread ID. Here's the important piece here. Chat.threadID. So what's going on here? We have our loader. The loader ensures that we have certain query data. In this case, it ensures that we have, for the get thread by ID query, the data for this specific thread ID. And the thread ID is defined as part of the params, which it gets type safely through this name here. It knows that thread ID exists because it is inferring it off of the string that we defined here. And again, if I rename this to thread ID LOL, it'll rename that accordingly. And now I get a type error here because params does not have this specific field on it. If I rename it back, we're good with some type safety stuff because I'm using the new TypeScript Go thing, which doesn't recover from these things as well. Reset the language server, and we're good to go. And then the actual route component, which is the thing that is returned here, which now knows that thread ID exists because it knows this route, which we defined here, has that on it. And it's again the magic of tanstack stuff. The tanstack router plus tanstack start combo lets you define a route as a thing that resolves this URL, it has this ID in the params. We have this data, we know it exists, and we have this component that gets rendered. Now we know for a fact, whenever we are calling a route component that is defined as this route, that the thread ID will exist. Otherwise, this component will not render. This convex query has been loaded. Otherwise, this will not render. We could even return data here and know it'll be there if we call route.useData or something along those lines. We then render our background prefetcher to keep the other threads in sync, the chat, and the message widget that we are, and then the message widget, which is render the message widget, well, a mock of it that we show when we don't have the rest of the data just yet. Awesome. But what about those backend functions? You know, the /chat endpoints of the world that we relied on so heavily that was the reason that we were using Next in the first place. Well, as you see, our app folder is now empty. It just got left behind by a bad git pull. Happens a lot. We hop into backend /API/chat. You'll see we have this index.post.ts, this resume.get.ts, and abort post.ts. If you're deep in tanstack stuff, you might be a little surprised because that's not the format that you usually use for exporting functions in tanstack. You'll also see a lot of effect code here, which you might assume is the thing that we're doing. It is not. Here is where we start getting into the problems that we have with tanstack. I don't know how many of these are tanstack specific. I am not smart enough to go too deep into what caused these things, because I did not do this port. We had a lot of problems trying to deploy this. The main one was this error. Error in root route, type error, fetch failed on the internal NDC fetch instance in Node itself. Yes, Node's fetch implementation is just in DC. We were constantly hitting this once we rolled out far enough. We'd hit about 60% rollout, and then this would start being seen in our servers, and clients weren't rendering. We had a lot of theories about this. I insisted that we turn off server rendering entirely because I didn't think we benefited from it, and this was terrifying. Apparently, a lot of people who have ported big apps over to tanstack start on Vercel have run into things like this. Gabriel said they've had the issue quite a bit for Axiom as well. We had it so bad that our deployments were crashing as soon as we hit like 60% rollout. It was not good. It was looking real bad. I bugged a lot of people at Vercel. I believe Julius and crew bugged Tanner and a few other people working on the actual bundling side for tanstack. It was rough. The solution ended up honestly being even rougher. The problem, as I understand it, is that the way TanStack was handling lazy bundling of routes was pulling in the JS for the route when the route was hit, but it would keep all of the JS there for all of the routes to be served. So every URL points to the same place. That place has as little JavaScript loaded as possible, but knows where the other bundles are. Once it sees the URL that you're requesting for, it would then go grab the right JS for that URL and then use that to serve the user. Now do that tens of thousands of times for every different route, where different routes have different JS. And now add any bug to the cleanup logic, or even a bug for how it dedupes. If 5 people make a request to the same endpoint at the same time, and they're all served by this at the same time, I can see how easy it'd be to write the code that then goes and loads the same JS 5 times. We don't know the deep details just yet. Puya and a few others are doing a call tomorrow to try and figure this out. I might even re-record this whole video once we get more info, to be determined. The result was that we don't trust the TanStack route resolvers for things other than like resolving the experience users are downloading HTML for. We could easily handle all the different routes people load and go to in the browser. But once we had all of these endpoints that we're trying to resolve on the same Fluid Compute instance at the same time, they would often hit problems where they were overloaded by pulling too many files in. We were getting this too many files error constantly. Yeah, the EM file code. It was rough. We tried a lot of different things to try and resolve this. After talking to Puya and a few others at Vercel, Puya suggested that we look more deeply into how Nitro handles routes. Nitro is an optional dependency for TanStack, but it is a common one because it's how you deploy TanStack on things like Vercel. Nitro is a set of tools for building server rendered toolkits primarily. If you want to make an app that works on server and on client and have one TypeScript codebase that handles it all, Nitro is a set of primitives that make it possible. It was originally built as a deep part of the chaos that is the Next ecosystem, the Vue Next world. But Nitro, along with the Next team, got acquired by Vercel, and there's been a lot of work in standardizing Nitro so that it's way better, more reliable for giant apps. If there's anything in here that's worth showcasing, probably not. Yeah. Ideally, you'll never have to know anything about Nitro because it lives a layer deeper than we should as application developers. But if you're trying to build your own alternative to Next.js or Next or Vue or SvelteKit or whatever, Nitro is a really important building block. And having Puya, who is the lead maintainer and creator of Nitro, helping us out has been essential. It was his belief that the way lazy loading works for routes in Nitro should handle all the problems that we were having. So Julius filed quite the pull request to run API routes as separate functions, which included patching the TanStack start server core to export this get h3 event binding, which is part of how Nitro handles events internally, so that we would have access to that so we could bind our own Nitro events directly. Previously, let me find an example here of one of these server functions. So here's a simple example. We have this TRPC endpoint that was trpc.$TRPC.ts. That's again how in TanStack we would get the data for that route, like the parameters, and pass things over. Now we are moving to the nitros index because we're moving to nitro as the thing that resolves these routes, which means we need our own way to get the event that is the thing that happened on that route so we can pass that to our handler. So we have this H3 event helper that we ripped out of TanStack and out of Nitro and re-exported so we could use it for our mix of Nitro routes and TanStack routes. I'm trying to find if there's like a clear place where we handled this, like if we did any rerouting on like a higher level. Oh yeah, the route tree piece here, yeah. So you'll see here the route tree, which again, I actually like having it be codegen and committed because you can look at the output of this and know what changed. And here you see all of our API endpoints got removed. Routes, API upload thing, routes, API stripe, status, server version, checkout sync, chat. All of our API routes were removed from TanStack entirely. I want to find where we actually end up serving them now. And then here we have this Nitro. And then here in the Vite config where we actually configure Nitro, we pass a server dir now. Very important. The server directory is us specifying where the server functions defined the way Nitro likes are. And by putting this here, we are able to define our own Nitro functions outside of defining them in TanStack, which is kind of funny because if we go back to what my previous plan was, we've almost recreated the Vite plus Hano setup that I was talking about wanting way back. But instead, it's all being done inside of TanStack Start. Instead of doing this on the outside of the framework, we're doing it inside of the framework, which does admittedly require quite a few hacks. The fact that we had to patch package TanStack Start in order to expose the event helper so we'd have access to that is a little annoying. Ideally, nobody would need this get H3 event thing, but we do because we couldn't use the TanStack routes at the scale we're shipping. I didn't realize how many other random hellish things we had to do for handling our analytics proxy because it would use the wrong content encoding when we proxy. God, there's so many of these little things. Like anybody telling you that our Next.js solution was a bunch of hacks and we could just move off it and get rid of the hacks. No. Any large enough application will have hacks in every direction always. We traded one set that were scarier for a set that is overall less scary. But there are still things like this, where we have to serve this file from our public directory instead of serving it through this redirect because of the way the content encoding would break. And now we get to this max duration 799 thing. There's a good chance you're looking at that and thinking, what the fuck is that? That's a really good question. The max duration for an at the time we built most of T3 chat, the maximum duration for how long a request could be in flight for on a Vercel server before it is killed was 800 seconds. I also just noticed, I saw the Lee or the Ryan F. Anderson comment. I didn't see it was from you, Lee. Let me VIP you. Thanks for stopping by. This is a fun one. Cool. The maximum duration on Vercel for a function being executed is 800 seconds. So if you have an AI generation that takes 900 seconds, it's going to get cut off before then. The default is 300, but the actual hard max is 800. So why do we pick 799? Not as simple to answer as you might hope. Going back to the Next.js version, you will notice that I put this on the API chat route. The max duration 799. The reason I describe here. This breaks out the API chat route from being bundled in Fluid Compute. other functions resolve faster and get in the way of parallelizing this particular route. This is a hack that was suggested by Malta. One of the important pieces of how fluid compute works is it is a strategy to allow for many requests to be resolved by one node or one instance of Lambda running node at the same time. Normally, the way Lambda works is a request comes in, it gets resolved, and then that Lambda takes the next request once it's done with the previous one, but it only does one at a time. So if your request logic is spending a lot of time waiting, that node is just sitting there doing nothing until the next piece of whatever it's expected to do comes in. So if you're doing an AI generation and you're hitting the OpenAI API for ChatGPT, whenever you're not getting a new token, you're sitting there doing nothing. Fluid compute is awesome because it allows for your network to and this is why fluid compute is awesome, because it lets you reuse that less used compute that would just be sitting there doing nothing, waiting for the next chunk to come from the API, and use that compute to and you can use that compute to resolve other requests. So 5 people can be requesting at the same time, and all of that is going through at once. Super nice. It lets you pay way less money and take much more advantage of your servers. When your request only took 100 milliseconds, this didn't matter. Now that the request can take 800 seconds, it matters a lot more. So why did I pick 799 here? Because every other route was set to 800. If you have 2 different routes that have different max durations, the way that fluid compute is provisioned and deployed would allow for all of the ones that share a max duration to be served together, and the ones that don't have a shared max duration to be broken off on their own. So effectively, this guarantees all API/chat requests go to the same set of lambdas, and all other requests go to a different set. The setting of this 1 second difference breaks out the bundles so that they are separate and different routes are hitting different boxes. This made it way easier to handle, this was great because it meant that the chat deduping and handling all of the chat requests on one Lambda could scale way better. Because now, let's say hypothetically, one of these boxes can handle 1,000 requests. If a third of them are chat requests that take 800 seconds up to, and the rest are all TRPC calls that take 50 milliseconds, that is not an optimal use of fluid compute. Ideally, the box that can handle long requests is handling a lot of them, and its slots for how many requests it can handle aren't being wasted by something that does more I/O per second and is going for way fewer seconds. It's way easier for the fluid compute routing layer to know how to route things with this little hint. We have basically lost that here because, as far as I understand, putting this max duration here is making all of our APIs bundled under that. So we no longer have the chat endpoint split off from the other API endpoints. But we do have the API endpoints split off separately from the TANstack start ones, which is a good enough solution for now because we've really reduced the number of those API calls that happen. Most of everything now goes through Convex and the chat endpoint. That said, it would be nice if we could still change the duration on just chat so it would be bundled separately and maximize our fluid compute usage. Let me actually go check how our fluid compute use is right now. Does it not show the reutilization in this anymore? I'm confused. Previously, you would just click view fluid compute metrics, and it would tell you how much of your compute was being reused. And now it just doesn't. Yeah. That's annoying. Ugh. Any helpful in YouTube chat? Nope. I wanted to see how much compute reuse was happening, but I think they got rid of that view, which is super annoying. Like, so annoying. Yeah. Anyways, Vercel, don't hide things that I would use to make your product look good. I really miss having that view. That is so annoying. I don't even know why they'd make that change. That's stupid. No Vercel current or ex employees that can tell me what happened to my fluid compute page. I can't see that anymore. Ugh. Yeah. I wanted to see how this change affected our fluid compute utilization, but they got rid of the dashboard that I would normally check that in Vercel, so I can't show you. Annoying. Yeah. So now for the last piece, SSR. The easiest way to know that we have SSR now is when you go to an incog tab and load, you'll see the skeleton that I don't like very much. See the bottom there where it shows the login state and then it vanishes and becomes the login button. See the sidebar here where it has the fake empty chats. That's all because we are now rendering a template and then filling in the pieces once the server finishes them or the client does for different routes. And for certain things, like when you load a specific chat, for the first time, we render it on the server to get as much of the data there as possible before you start loading the page on your side. Hypothetically, this should be really good. And in a lot of ways it is. Like when I'm navigating around here, it feels good. And when I refresh, it loads pretty much instantly and you get a better state for your chat history when it happens. It is in a lot of ways good. But I am still skeptical of how much we benefit from server rendering at all. Apparently, is a dashboard under usage. I don't see it. There used to be a like how much compute is being reused thing here. Let me hunt through my dashboard a bit more. One sec. Is chat having problems? It was? Oh, God. Apparently, Twitch chat was kind of down. That's very annoying. I see why Aiden disappeared. Was he just giving us shit for the JS ecosystem? Hey, Aiden, I bet if you used web components, Twitch chat wouldn't have went down. Yeah, YouTube chat was broken last stream. Twitch chat's broken this stream. Great. Do I use Cloudflare? Yeah, but not for too much. Let me find page again. You know, I can't find any of the data I'm looking for. That is quite annoying. Interesting. Okay, that was the route I was already on, and it's not showing me what I'm looking for. There used to be a chart here that would show you how much of your compute is being, like, reused, and it's gone. I swear it was in this box here. It is quite annoying that I cannot see the thing I'm looking for. Oh well. So I'm going to ask this question differently, Alex. What would we get for having a dedicated infra person? Like, what benefit do we have? Clicking the region does nothing. They both just bring us to the project settings. Same with this button. Just brings you to settings. When you click view fluid compute metrics, it brings you to that same page. We're just in a redirect loop. I click here. I click view fluid compute metrics, and we're right back where we were. Guys, I know how to navigate the Vercel dashboard. I spend more time in here than most of you combined. The thing I'm looking for isn't here anymore. Like they put the view fluid compute metrics button here, and you go to it, and it doesn't show you fluid compute metrics anymore. Vercel. An infra person would not meaningfully improve our SLAs at all. I do have observability plus. We are on the $20 a month plan, but we also go way over the $20 a month plan for our usage, so we pay a lot more. You have it. I'm being A/B tested. I might be in some beta. Creating a single API for Vercel Edge. Oh, we're not using Vercel's Edge for that. Like the Edge redirects to their like Lambda nodes. Actively routing each request through Vercel individually. I have no idea what you're asking here, Paul. No, it's not that. It's the routing logic is tracking how many requests are going at a given time. And if there's enough, it doesn't know how heavy a given request will be. Some requests will do a lot of I/O and take milliseconds. Some requests will do almost no I/O and take a shitload of seconds. There is no automation layer there. It's much easier to break it, or to break off. I only had the observability on Vercel, so they would be more helpful during debugging. I was planning on turning it back off, but I wanted this particular chart that only they have. Do not use Cloudflare in front of Vercel. That is a really bad thing to do. You are stripping Vercel of a lot of the data they use to do good firewall stuff because of the way the Cloudflare redirect works. Using Cloudflare in front of other things makes a lot of sense, but with Vercel's firewall and its current state and how good it is, I wouldn't put Cloudflare in front. I would keep those things separate. Yeah, apparently Twitch chat's just like dead right now, which is fun. What else do I want to cover here? I was just starting to talk about the server rendering stuff, so I could do that a bit more. Yeah. As I was saying, we are now server rendered. There are lots of benefits to it. There are some negatives to it. I am the most skeptical one on the team. I don't think this is necessary. I am highly considering pulling us off of it. But it is cool that the first load has like a better state overall. It has its catches, like the way that the names load in was not right originally. We've fixed it for the most part. It is really cool that we're sending down a better payload from the server than we previously were. But at the same time, I think I would prefer if we had one HTML file serving the majority of our site and just did everything on client side where it made sense to. But again, I'm not the one who made these decisions. I'm not really the tech lead for T3 Chat anymore. I have to run the company and do this channel and do everything else that I have to do in a given day. My team made these decisions because I hired my team to make good decisions. This is the decision that they wanted, and I have argued it plenty. They are still confident it was the right one, and I will continue to back them until we as a team decide otherwise. And at least we're more stable than Twitch chat. It's funny because I've previously bragged that Twitch chat is proof that we know how to do quickly updating complex chat UIs. And now Twitch chat is down literally as I am filming. Okay. Let's wrap this one up. Our move off of Next.js isn't because Next.js bad. It's not because we are super excited about TanStack Start. It is for the same reasons that it was when we were first planning it back in February, which is that the way I'm hacking Next.js to behave how we want isn't ideal. We don't want to wait for the next team to make the single page app experience better. So we want to move to something that has a better or single page app experience. We still want to maintain the cohesion of the front end and back end deploying together. So a framework that allows us to have one package JSON that pulls the two together is very enticing to us. And we really like Tanner in the way that he builds. We have found TanStack Start to be, for the most part, flexible enough for our use case. It is still very early, which scares the shit out of me. And a lot of the problems that we've had are us going head first into the fire and bringing out the solutions for everybody else. Like having to move all of our routes off of TanStack to Nitro is the type of thing that would have kept me from making the move in the first place. If I was known, or if I was told that that's something we'd have to do, I would have blocked the TanStack Start move. But now that it's done, we have a code base that we understand much better. A lot of the bugs we were dealing with before around off-state stuff are much clearer and easier for us to find. We don't have the huge pile of tech debt that was largely composing both. We get to leave behind all the backwards compat and monolithic chaos that was Next.js with something that's quite a bit more minimal and newer and a little bit more flexible for the things we need. We love the new routing stuff in TanStack Router. It's significantly better. And now my team, the people who actually run this every day, are the ones who own the implementation details, not me. That's arguably the biggest win here, is that the code is no longer Theo's code being fixed by the team. The code is now the team's code. Mark and Julius worked really hard on these changes. Julius in particular went crazy pulling this all off. I get to wipe my hands clean now. I'm out. And this move isn't one from Next to TanStack. This move is much more so off of Theo's hacky layers on top of TanStack. Or this was much more so removing retake on that. This isn't moving Next to TanStack, as many of you guys are going to brand it. This isn't Theo getting excited about the shiny new thing. In fact, I probably wouldn't have even chosen TanStack. This is the move away from Theo's hacky pile of solutions, forcing Next.js to behave how I wanted, towards something that the team better understands and controls that gets us closer to our long-term vision of how we want T3 chat. We traded one set of hacks for another. We traded one framework for another. But in the end, the majority of the code in the repo didn't change. We are still deep in it, trying to make the best possible chat experience. My team can now debug more easily. The tech we're building on feels a little better overall. But in the end, this honestly kind of deepened my appreciation for Next and the fact that I could abuse it the ways I did and it worked for the most part. It also, man, the scaling and large code base size issues we've been hitting with TanStack, like the Nitro stuff, just, it shows how early these things are. And they really are. If you're here looking for advice on what stack to build your next project with, I got nothing for you. I've had enough problems with all of these stacks that there's no easy, obvious recommendation. Yeah. There's no real lesson to take from this other than the inner workings are interesting, and once you ship at a certain size and scale, your team and their needs are way more important in the real world than any particular framework will tell you. If anybody thinks our problems can be solved with a simple move to Laravel or a simple move to TanStack Start or some other thing, they're either lying to you because they don't know what they're talking about or they have something to sell you. Don't trust them. I'm not here to sell you anything other than a really good AI chat app that you should definitely check out. And if you're thinking that this is something to do with like the Vercel exploit or any drama on that side, and you ignored the fact that we have been building all of this on Vercel the whole time, I don't know what to tell you. I hope you start listening a little more closely, because obviously this is not us disliking Vercel. This is us having very specific technical requirements that no framework serves properly, so we're trying to find the one that we can bastardize the best to give us the experience we want to have. Right now, it seems like TanStack Start probably will get there, both because it has a lot of really good pieces, and I feel like we can influence the developers building it most to get it where we need it to be. But man, nothing works how we want it to, and this has been a hell of a move. Hopefully the next video will be about how exciting our new features are that we get to ship because we're now unblocked on all the tech stuff. But I have a bad feeling we're going to hit more edges on the way there. Wish us luck. It's going to be hellish. And until next time, peace, nerds. I'll mark around that. Someone asked earlier, do we want to scroll it in? Like, are we moving off of Next because of Vercel's CEO's politics? I wish I could explain just how stupid a question that was properly. If we were moving because of a distaste for Vercel, we would move off of Vercel. Why would we switch from one open source project to another? We're not making, like, it just, every layer of that question is just so fucking stupid that it pisses me off. And I'm scared I'm going to get canceled if I say anything more because you people are so ferociously fucking stupid when you talk about these things. No. We made the right technical choice for our technical team. There are lots of things I don't like about Vercel. There's lots of things a lot of people don't like about Vercel. We didn't fucking move off Vercel. We're still on Vercel. Vercel makes as much money off us as they did before. Like, I don't get it. Like, a deep dive between two open source frameworks has no politics involved at all. I just don't get how people think this way. These are like the two... This combined with the fucking like, oh, you're making the move because of the security thing when we've literally been working on this since February is just insane. Genuinely insane to me. Yeah, some people's hate for Vercel prevents neurons from firing. Actually, though, genuinely, this is how it feels constantly. Is like people hate Vercel so deeply that anything they say about them comes out unintelligibly stupid. And this is a perfect way of putting it. This is an experience I have every day. It's why I mute half the posts I put on Twitter because I don't even want to see the replies. It's just so dumb. Like, yeah. Let me thank all the subs that I missed while I was filming that quick. Thank you guys regardless. Thank you Sleep on Car for the Prime. Pierce Codes for the 6-month. DC Holhoa. Hopefully I got that right for 2 months. DZ continuing a gift sub as well. Appreciate that. NMG throwing a year gift to Mulroy. Awesome. He went from 0 badges to 2 very quickly. Taco Bandit for 22 months of support. Fucking legend. Zedlocks 1 at the Prime. Isaac Codes at the Prime. Lotus resubbing 13 months in. NMG also giving a year bomb to Lee Rob. Appreciate that a ton. Happy that they all get the badges they deserve. Sadly, Rob disappeared when chat broke and couldn't help me figuring out that route thing with the dashboard for Vercel. I'm not annoying, but whatever. And then CJU with the resub, post in Tansac Discord, like, how do you test middleware? And the response is, good idea. We'll think about it in the future. Yeah, it's early. It is quite early. We should figure out who we're rating so that I can go respond to messages as long as possible before having to do Advent of Code. Also to film ads. Fuck, I have too much to do. I am annoyed. Make sure we move this over. Cool. Who deserves the raid today? Oh, Shindigs. Easy. Easy. He's only been live for 40 minutes. Perfect. Have fun with Shindigs. I'll see you guys on Wednesday at latest. Maybe earlier if there's any big enough news. Have fun with the digs. Thank you, NMG. I'll try to get to it ASAP. I'll definitely let you know, Gabriel. Have fun. Bye, nerds. Let me say bye to YouTube chat first, too. Sorry I was not as responsive here, guys. Everything's been fucking broken all day. Thank you all for coming through. I'll see you all soon.
What is this meme? You don't know about the meme?
Bye to YouTube as well.
Let me find it.